Have you ever sat quietly and wondered, when did things change between me and my children? You spent years raising them, changing diapers, staying up through sleepless nights, guiding them through heartbreaks and triumphs. You gave up weekends, vacations, and sometimes even your own dreams to make theirs come true. And now, when you speak, they interrupt. When you offer advice, they brush it off. When you need help, they're suddenly too busy. Worst of all, you feel invisible, like somehow you stopped mattering. If that feeling sounds familiar, please know, you're not alone. Many parents reach a point where the roles begin to shift. You were once the protector, the teacher, the person they turned to for everything. But now, it feels like they don't see you the same way. Sometimes they treat you as an inconvenience instead of a guide. Or worse, they make you feel like a burden. That kind of pain cuts deeper than almost anything else. It's natural to want to react, to remind them of all the things you've done, to get angry, shout, or shut down. But here's the truth, and it may surprise you, demanding respect rarely brings it back. What actually works is much more powerful and far more dignified. That's what we'll talk about today. Because there are simple but meaningful things you can start doing right now that can completely change how your children see and treat you. Not through guilt or arguments, but through quiet strength, calm boundaries, and self-respect. These aren't tricks. They're real shifts that can restore the dignity and connection you deserve. Let's start with something that might feel familiar: trying too hard to please them. Have you ever said yes when you really wanted to say no, just to avoid conflict? Or gone out of your way to do something for your kids even when it made you uncomfortable, just so they wouldn't be upset? Many parents do this without realizing it. Maybe you rearranged your whole day to watch the grandkids even when you weren't feeling well. Or you let them talk to you in a tone that made your stomach twist, just to keep the peace. Here's what's important to understand. The more you chase their approval, the less they respect you. Not because they're bad people, but because human nature tends to value what stands firm, not what always bends. There was a woman I once met named Linda. She raised 3 children with everything she had, but as she got older, she kept stepping aside. She let them make decisions about her home, her health, even her finances. "I just want to keep everyone together," she'd say. But the more she gave in, the more they ignored her opinions. She thought she was being kind. What they saw was someone they didn't need to take seriously anymore. Respect doesn't come from sacrifice, it comes from self-respect. When you constantly put yourself last, you quietly teach those around you that your needs and time don't matter as much, and people respond to that lesson. So, if this sounds like you, let me say this clearly. Stop bending over backward. It's okay to say no. It's okay to have limits. You're allowed to speak up when something doesn't sit right. You're allowed to take up space, and you don't need anyone's permission to do so. Respect begins with you. The more you honor your own boundaries, the more others will too. It doesn't mean being rude. It means showing your children that your time, your energy, and your presence are valuable. That you're not afraid to stand tall in your truth. Now let's talk about another reaction that's tempting, but rarely helps: arguing. When someone talks down to you, your first instinct is to push back. You want to say, "How dare you talk to me that way?" Or, "Do you remember everything I've done for you?" And while those feelings are completely valid, that reaction usually doesn't fix anything. In fact, it can make things worse. Here's what can really change things. Stop arguing and start leading. When you respond to disrespect with anger or shouting, you're showing that the other person still controls your emotions. But when you respond with calm, grounded confidence, it sends a very different message. It says, "I don't have to raise my voice, I know who I am." Let me tell you about George, a retired history teacher I once knew. In his classroom, students respected him for decades, but at home, his adult children barely listened. They interrupted him, dismissed his opinions, even laughed at his advice. At first, George fought back. Every conversation turned into a battle. Every disagreement ended in yelling. but nothing changed. Then one day, he stopped fighting. He decided he would still speak his truth, but calmly, without trying to win. He stopped chasing their respect and started embodying it. He carried himself like someone who had nothing left to prove, and something amazing happened. His kids started listening, not because he shouted louder, but because he didn't play the same old game. You don't have to fight for respect. You can live it. Let your calm become your power. Let your tone show your strength. You don't need to convince your children to see your worth. They'll feel it in your presence. Here's another truth that might sting at first, but ultimately frees you. You don't need your children to fulfill you emotionally. That doesn't mean you don't love them. It just means your happiness shouldn't depend on them. The more you rely on their attention or approval to feel valued, the more that relationship tilts in the wrong direction. People, yes, even your own kids, respect those who are emotionally independent. When your peace and joy come from within, not from how often they call or visit, they begin to see you differently. Not as someone clinging to the past, but as someone with a rich, meaningful life of their own. I remember Carol, a kind-hearted woman who gave everything to her kids. But when they moved away, she was crushed. She waited by the phone, called every day, told them how much she missed them. But instead of drawing them closer, they pulled away. She couldn't understand. She was giving love, so why weren't they returning it? Then one day, she decided to focus on herself again. She joined a painting class, met friends for coffee, started reading, laughing, and living again. And guess what? Her phone started ringing. Her kids wanted to hear about her life. They missed her, not her attention, but her energy. Because now, she wasn't chasing their presence. She was attracting it by simply living fully. So if you feel that ache in your chest when they don't call, or that quiet sadness when they don't visit, remind yourself, your worth doesn't come from how much attention you get. It comes from within. The more you nurture your own light, the more others will naturally be drawn to it, with genuine respect and care. When you step back emotionally, not in anger, but in strength, something changes. Your children stop seeing you as someone waiting for their approval and start seeing you as someone who values themselves, someone grounded, confident, and quietly powerful. That shift might seem subtle, but it's real. And over time, it becomes undeniable. To truly rebuild respect, you also need boundaries. Strong, clear, loving ones. Boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about teaching them how to treat you. Many adult children cross lines not out of cruelty, but because those lines were never clearly drawn. Not out of weakness, but maybe out of love or fear of conflict. But love without limits can easily turn into resentment. Silence over time becomes permission. Let me tell you about Henry, a retired engineer who'd once led entire teams. At work, he was respected and admired. At home, though, things were different. His grown kids interrupted him, mocked his advice, and spoke to him as if he didn't understand anything anymore. At first, he stayed quiet. It's not worth the fight, he told himself. But every time he stayed silent, they pushed a little more. One evening, during dinner, his daughter snapped at him for how he told a story. That night, Henry didn't yell or scold. He waited until things were calm and then said firmly but gently, "You don't have to agree with everything I say, but I expect to be spoken to with respect. If that's not possible, I'll step away from conversations like this." The room went quiet. Something powerful had shifted. He didn't threaten or argue. He just made it clear. This is the standard. And over time, it worked. His kids realized he meant it. They didn't lose him, but they learned that his presence came with respect attached. It became part of their new family dynamic, not because he demanded it, but because he required it. Boundaries aren't control, they're clarity. When your limits are clear, people show up differently. They realize your time and energy aren't infinite, they're precious. Not guaranteed, not owed, but valued. Now let's look at one more pattern that often gets overlooked. Giving too much without appreciation. You know that feeling? You offer help, advice, time, maybe even money, because that's what you've always done. And maybe you're not expecting anything back. But it still hurts when no one notices. When they take and take, but never pause to ask how you're doing. It's natural to want to give. That instinct doesn't fade. But here's the truth. When you keep giving without limits or gratitude, you don't teach them to love you more. You teach them to expect more. And your generosity fades into background noise, something they don't even see anymore. Giving should come from love, not habit or guilt. Because when your giving is balanced, rooted in choice, not obligation, it has meaning again. Your children start to value what you offer because they know it's not automatic, it's intentional. It comes from strength, not from need. So if you've been feeling unseen or unheard, it's time to remember this. Respect starts with you. It's not something you demand. It's something you demonstrate. By standing tall, setting boundaries, living fully, and giving with intention, you remind everyone, especially your children, that your worth was never up for debate. Daniel, a father of 3, had always been the helper. He'd lend money without a second thought. Show up anytime his kids needed help moving or fixing something. Even in his 70s, he'd rearrange doctor appointments just to babysit at the last minute. But when he had a minor surgery, none of his children offered to stay with him afterward. They were all too busy. That moment broke something in him, and instead of getting angry, he paused. He thought deeply. Then he made a quiet but firm decision. No more automatic yes. From now on, he would help only when it was truly needed, and when it was appreciated. He didn't become cold, he became clear. And slowly, his children noticed. When they asked for help, they started hearing, "I'd love to, but I have other plans that day," or "I'm happy to help if you can handle X, Y, and Z." At first they were surprised, even frustrated, but soon they began showing more gratitude. Because the help wasn't expected anymore, it was valued. The truth is, when you pull back just enough for others to feel the weight of your absence, they begin to appreciate your presence again. You don't have to stop being kind, but kindness without limits becomes unfair, to you and to them. And while we're here, let's take a moment to reflect on something deeply important. You are not just a parent. You are a person, with your own life, dreams, time, and identity. And one of the most freeing, healing things you can do, for your children and yourself, is to build a life that exists beyond them. That idea might feel strange at first. Maybe you've spent decades putting your family before everything. Maybe you've told yourself, "I'll start caring for myself once the kids are settled." But now that they're grown and you've entered this new season of life, ask yourself, what fills my heart now? Because here's what happens. When your children see that you're living, not just waiting, they begin to admire you. They're drawn to you. They respect you, not out of guilt, but because they see someone who radiates purpose and grace. You're not here just to serve them. You're here to live fully, to rediscover the parts of yourself that may have been on hold for years. Whether it's joining a class, picking up a new hobby, traveling, reconnecting with friends, or simply enjoying your mornings at your own pace, you're allowed to choose joy. And when you do, something amazing happens. Your children begin to see you not just as mom or dad, but as a whole vibrant person, with your own story, your own strength, and your own light. Now that you've started changing how you carry yourself, speaking up when needed, setting healthy limits, and letting go of old patterns, you may begin to feel something powerful. The tension starts to fade. The heaviness lifts. You're no longer walking on eggshells or waiting for small signs of appreciation. You're standing tall again, not because your children have changed overnight, but because you have. And that's the heart of this message. Respect isn't something we force out of others. It's something we quietly inspire through the way we live. And the moment you begin living with more self-respect, everything around you slowly starts to shift. Let's remember something simple but often forgotten. You matter. Not for what you give, not for what you've done, but because you exist. The world and your family need the version of you who feels grounded, calm, and confident. The version who doesn't shrink to keep the peace, but stands tall with love. That version changes everything. You might be surprised at how your children begin to respond. Maybe they call more often. Maybe their tone softens. Maybe they start asking for your opinion and actually listen. These aren't coincidences. These are the results of you reclaiming your place in the relationship, not through guilt or demand, but through presence, strength, and self-worth. But even if they don't change right away, don't lose heart. People need time to adjust. They've grown used to a version of you that always said yes, stayed quiet, and gave endlessly without asking for anything in return. When you begin changing that pattern, it's uncomfortable at first, for them and even for you. But that discomfort is part of healing, and it's worth it. Remember, love and respect are not the same thing. You can love your children deeply and still set boundaries. You can care for them with all your heart and still say, "I won't be spoken to that way." That's not being harsh. That's being healthy. That's what mature love looks like. And, more often than not, these changes don't just improve how you're treated. They strengthen the bond itself. Because when your children see that you respect yourself, it encourages them to respect you too. When they see you living fully, laughing, learning, enjoying your life, they start to admire you again. Not out of duty, but from genuine respect. So here's a gentle question for you today. Where are you still giving your power away? Is it in saying yes when your heart says no? Is it in staying quiet when you should speak up? Or maybe it's in waiting for your children's approval to feel good about yourself? Wherever that place is, start there. Make one small change. Maybe it's saying, "I have plans today, but I'd love to see you another time." Maybe it's telling your son or daughter, "I deserve to be spoken to respectfully, or we can finish this talk later." Maybe it's taking that long-awaited trip, joining a community group, or finally starting that hobby you've been putting off. Just one small step, that's all it takes. And please don't think you need to be perfect. You don't have to get it all right. What matters is that you begin, that you start honoring your voice, your time, your worth. Because that's where respect begins. If this message speaks to your heart, if you've ever sat quietly, feeling overlooked or underappreciated by your own children, I want you to hear this clearly. You deserve better. Not because of everything you've done in the past, but because of who you are today. And if you're still here listening, I want to thank you for your openness, your courage, and your heart. It takes real strength to look within, and that means you're already walking the path back to the respect you've always deserved. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you experienced moments when your children spoke to you without the respect you hoped for? Have you tried setting limits or stepping back emotionally? What worked best for you? Your story could be exactly what someone else needs to hear. So leave a comment below, even just a few words. And if this message touched you or gave you comfort, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps others find this kind of content. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon so you'll know when we post more videos to support, uplift, and walk beside you. You are never too old to reclaim your voice, never too late to rebuild respect, and never too far from the love and peace you truly deserve. Thank you for sharing your time with me. You are worthy, you are strong, and you are not alone. Until next time, take care. And remember, living with dignity is the most powerful message you'll ever send.